Okay, the little red light is on. You know what that means, don't you? This is Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is Jay Brown. Welcome and thanks, new listeners and old friends alike. Appreciate you tuning in. How's the weather where you are? I'm asking because here in Pennsylvania where I live, we're having some very bipolar weather patterns. Yesterday, it was 56 degrees out. That's Fahrenheit for all of my European friends. And it was warm. I was outside, no coat, no hat, very comfortable. This morning, I woke up to 6 inches of snow. and it's still wintertime. I'm not surprised by another snowstorm. It's just the drastic swing from one day to the next. Seems really unsettling, like my whole system feels like it's been in a little bit of a whiplash. I don't know, I don't take it as a good sign. But hey, things are shifting drastically these days, aren't they? So why should the weather be any different, I suppose? In any case, I'm glad you're here. Thanks. And thanks for all of the feedback from last week's episode with Swami Sharadananda. I really appreciate it. I appreciated all the recommendations you've made. I've reached out to many of those folks that you suggested. And next week and in some coming weeks, we will have more conversation about meditation and samadhi and texts. Got some stuff in the works, so thanks to everybody for listening and feeding back. Today, we're going to bring things a little bit more back down onto the ground in the sense that I wanted to have some more conversations around what's happening right now with people. A few weeks back, I had Lucas Rockwood on. We were talking about the studio model, if you were listening then. But today I wanted to get more of a perspective from a teacher on the ground. And specifically, I had been thinking about the conversations I was having before the pandemic about inclusivity and accessibility. It seemed like we had made some strides and things were changing about yoga classes so that there was less of this idea of a particular yoga body, and it was more open to lots of different kinds of people. And then the pandemic hit and everybody's online, and I don't know, I've been curious about that. And I was wondering what it's been like for folks. And that's when I made some contact with today's guest, Cara Suttie, and she was talking about that. And so it seemed like the perfect person for me to connect with, and I think it was. She confirms some of the things I was suspicioning, but also illuminates some things I didn't know. So it was great to meet Cara and to hear her perspective, and I'm glad to be sharing it with you today. I must admit, I still don't feel like I have any kind of read on what's happening with yoga centers out there. I feel like I have a good sense of what's happening with individual teachers and people navigating, doing classes online, but I know very few people who are teaching at centers right now. And I'm curious if you're listening right now and you're a yoga center owner and you're in operation, I would really love to hear from you. I'd love to bring you on the show and show you some love. I want to celebrate the yoga centers that are managing to survive this whole thing and maybe hear how you're doing it. So, hey, if you're a yoga center owner, reach out. Also, if you're a yoga teacher out there who maybe has a different perspective than the one you're going to hear today, another perspective that you think others might want to hear, please reach out to me. Again, I do want to get more input from folks who are really Again, living it on the ground. Don't hesitate to shoot me a note. And before we get to my conversation with Cara, let me take a look over here at these notes. If there's other things, yes, I'm supposed to plug my stuff. I've got ongoing live stream classes and a weekly teacher's sangha and all kinds of on-demand video stuff too. If you want to connect with me in other ways besides just listening to this show, you can do that at jbrownyoga.com. Also, let me not forget to give a shout out to our podcast premium subscribers. I want to thank Tracy Cook and Brenda Lefso. Thanks, Tracy and Brenda. Appreciate you supporting us. If you've been listening to this show and appreciating what you hear and you want to show support or you want to gain access to the full archives, the way to do that is become a podcast premium subscriber. It's choose your rate. You can cancel at any time. If you don't have money, just email us. We will definitely give you a free account. But for as little as $5 a month, you can be of great help to this show. And we are grateful to you. To learn more about becoming a podcast premium subscriber or find other stuff I was mentioning, all of it can be found at jbrownyoga.com. Okay? Okay. That's it, y'all. Like I said, feeling a little bit whiplashed over here by the strange weather patterns, so we'll just leave it there. I will touch base with you on the other side. But for now, let's get to it. Let's listen to this conversation that I had with Cara Suttie. Hello?
Hello?
Hello, Cara.
Hi, Jay. How are you?
I'm good. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, too.
I really felt like you reaching out to me had a synchronicity to it. It seems to be like a thing that's happening with the show a lot these days. I want to share that with you, but let me just mention, I know Zoom informs you that I'm recording, but I consider us already having begun, and I don't want you to find out about that later and feel surprised by that. Is that okay?
I appreciate that, and that's cool.
Cool. Thank you. I was going to share with you, and then anybody else who might listen to this at another time, that a lot of times these days, the way that the conversations are happening are synchronicities. And what happened with you is I started an online teacher training for the first time ever, maybe 3 weeks ago.
Oh, that's exciting.
And yeah, it's very exciting. And it's a wonderful group of people. And I'm so blessed and happy to have it be so diverse. Like, it's an incredibly diverse group of people. Nice. And in the beginning, I'm asking us all to inquire about what our experience of yoga has been. Like, where are we starting from, you know?
Yeah.
And one of the participants is larger bodied and has a lot of health issues and had shared some experiences that she had. And some of them were just straight up judgment, but some of it wasn't even that. It was even like when the teacher was very well intentioned, it's just like, oh, this class is a advanced class or whatever. And in order to accommodate her, they would have to change it so much or slow it down that it wasn't the right class for her or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was very upset by it. You know what I mean? Because I know it feels like things have changed a lot in certain ways, you know, and years ago I had people on the show and we had a lot of conversations around this. There was a whole new conversation around inclusivity and accessibility.
Yeah.
And I guess it got me thinking, even before I heard from you, that I was wondering, I wonder how this last 2 years has been for that. Like, in some ways, I imagine it's good, being able to turn your camera off, being able to have access to different teachers around the world. Like, I could see how there's a lot of wonderful things that have happened in it. But at the same time, I kind of wonder, part of it was that we were in the same room, not judging each other, you know?
Yeah.
So I wonder about that. And then you reached out to me and seemed like somebody I could have a good conversation with about it. So thank you for reaching out when you did and for giving me your time today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And yeah, I think you've made a lot of interesting points already. Is the shift has been so extreme for everybody in the past 2 years. Like, let's be very real. And there's definitely been some bonuses for people in bigger bodies. But then, definitely there's been some drawbacks too. And I mean, when I started practicing yoga, I started with a DVD. And
do you remember what DVD it was?
Oh, no.
You don't have to, but I'm always curious. What was the one? Was it Rodney Yee?
No, it wasn't Rodney Yee. I've still got it somewhere, and I believe she was Australian, if I'm remembering her accent correctly.
Okay.
But I bought it at my local big super center. The big brand one that starts with a W. And I just was, because I was like, okay, I want to try this yoga thing. And then I went to classes at a local community center. And I was so lucky that I got a teacher right away who was, if not super informed about teaching somebody in a bigger body, was not in their ego about what they knew and didn't know. And so was very welcoming and very happy to work with me to adapt. And so I was extremely blessed with my personal introduction to yoga, because I know a lot of people in big bodies do not have that experience, and I was really lucky. But yeah,
I'm sorry, can I interrupt you for a second? I want to ask you about your initial impulse to go to a class. Like, how old were you? Did you have other people in your life? I'm always curious, like, because a lot of people I talk to, they have this impulse to go to a yoga class without any real reason why. Like, do you have any idea, like, why you had the impulse to go?
Okay, so that's a great question. So I started out in dance. I started wanting to dance when I was easily like 2 years old. And the local dance studio wouldn't take me till I was 3. So I was this person who just from as basically younger than I can remember wanted to move. And I just loved moving. And unfortunately, because I was always big, I was growing up in the 70s and the 80s. So there was not a lot of understanding that you didn't have to be very small to be in movement. I eventually got sort of pushed out, and it really hurt my love of moving my body in a lot of ways for a long time. And I was just feeling like I wanted to move again. And what I had seen of yoga felt, I hate to use the word safe, but safe in that it wasn't asking me to jump up and down. It wasn't asking me to do anything that felt extremely aggressive to my body. So I thought, well, I'll try it, right? I'm home alone. Nobody's watching me do this, so I can look like an idiot, and it's fine. and I'll give this a try. And I really enjoyed that DVD. I found it's like, oh, hey, I can move my body again. And so that's once I had tried it on my own and was like, oh, I like this. And it did, like I said, it felt safe. It felt like I wasn't going to be laughed out of a room.
Now, I'm sorry, I don't want to necessarily ask your age unless you want to give it, but it does seem to me like what you're describing was before a time when like power yoga maybe took over. Like how?
I mean, I am 48, and so I probably bought that DVD when I was in my late 20s or early 30s.
We're the same. I'm 49. I first practiced when I was like, whatever, 20 or something. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I had gone at that point a lot of years without really moving. I had, when I was in university, I had gone to our university gym a couple of times, and oh God, did I feel like I was totally the fat chick in the room. and it was very clear I was, and it wasn't comfortable. So I got back out of it again, and I kept trying to dip my toe back in and kept feeling like I wasn't really welcome. And so, yeah, when I finally kind of was like, hey, I'm going to try this PVD. And it was like, ooh, this is good. You know, and so then I thought, well, okay, I'll try and go to my little local community center. I bet there'll be 4 people in the class. And I was right. There was like 4 of us in the class. And so I didn't feel like I was on display.
You know, it's interesting. I'm curious about this because I often say this, that when I first came to yoga at basically the same exact time you did, it sounds like advanced yoga was about inner peace. Like it hadn't been about strength and flexibility and functional movement yet. And in that frame, when it's about inner peace, then your body size doesn't matter in the same kind of way or something. It seems
right. Like. It's so true, right? If everybody in the space is looking to find a bit of calm, they're looking to quiet their mind, they're looking to be embodied, but not being, you know, look at me, twist myself into a pretzel and smile.
Yeah.
Right?
And you know what else I want to, what I would add is that it's also sometimes about that eventually, but people show up, I think, I know it was true for me, with all kinds of traumas that we're just trying to heal.
Yep. Same.
That's what it seems like. Everybody I talk to when I ask about their origins, that's another thing we're doing in the training. It's a lot about people dealing with deaths in their family. I heard that interview with you, so I know that's something you had to deal with at a very young age as well.
Yep.
It seems like there's something there about having to face those loss and deep tragedy and still carry on with your life, and yoga being an important vehicle for that. It's been so healing for me. In working through my traumas, because my dad died when I was 18 months old. I was given away I shouldn't say given away, that sounds awful. Given up for adoption when I was an infant. So basically I was adopted and then my dad died. So I had multiple levels of abandonment trauma from birth, basically. And then I dealt with abuse. So I had that level of trauma. And so it was like, it was a traumas on traumas thing. And not to denigrate my years of therapy, because it's been extremely helpful. I honestly believe my yoga journey is what really helped me heal. And I think whether I got to yoga because I wanted to move my body or what, the biggest thing it's done for me is help me heal. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I'm a big fan of therapy too. Don't get me wrong, but I hear what you're saying, that there's something like the healing that happens through kind of like a more somatic experience of yoga. Yes, is different than the kind of sorting through your mind. I mean, they work together quite well. I mean, but
I agree, they do.
Yeah. But there's something. The healing that happens through yoga is. I've been talking about it on the show a lot about on a spirit level. And I know that's sometimes take us into risky territory, but it does feel like there's some kind of more soul healing that happens that doesn't happen just from talk necessarily. Yeah,
I do. I feel the same way. And I understand why it feels risky to some people, but for me, that's been my experience of it. That's been my journey of yoga. Again, not talking for anybody else, but that's certainly been what it's done for me. So. Right.
Okay. So you started out with the DVD and then you found that one teacher. It sounds lovely that teacher was open to learn.
Yeah.
That's what happened for me. I didn't know shit about shit, but just wanted my neighbor to be able to come. Or I've talked about it a lot. Like my mom died when I was 16. And I just remember at one point it becoming imperative that my mom could come to my class if she were alive. You know?
Yeah.
And so, but I didn't know how to do that, but it's what you said, like being open and like in dialogue and wanting to learn and learning from people who came and, you know, who was how I figured a bunch of stuff out before there was all these like accessible yoga trainings and stuff out there, you know?
let me tell you, our best teachers are our students.
Yeah.
I truly believe that. Our best teachers, as yoga teachers, our best teachers are the people who come to practice with us. And that is one of the things that has been a little lost in the past 2 years for me, certainly. Though I've done some in-person classes when we've been where I am geographically, we've gone in and out of lockdowns, which I think is true for a lot of people. And so I have done some in-person classes when we weren't in lockdowns. And so I've had some experience of being in space and with people, but yeah, it is definitely one of the things that as we've moved to a more online model, we've certainly lost a little bit of, is that learning as much from our students as hopefully they're learning from us.
Yeah, that is interesting. That kind of goes to what I said at the very beginning about what's happened over the last 2 years. That's an interesting point.
Yeah.
I just out of curiosity for anybody listening, where are you right now?
So I am in Hamilton, Ontario, which is sort of partway between Toronto and Niagara Falls. And we are just coming out of another half partial lockdown. Literally today, a bunch of stuff reopened.
Wow. Well, strangely enough, the last time I went anywhere, and I mean outside of my state, really.
Yeah.
Last airplane trip I took was the first few days of March 2020. And strangely enough, I was in Canada. My best friend is a curling fan, so I went to the Briar.
Yeah.
You probably know what that is.
I know what the Briar is.
People listening might not know, but it was like right before everything closed down.
I'm going to be a slightly bad Canadian here. I don't dislike curling. I'm not like anti-curling, but I'm going to be really, really honest that if I'm trying to take a Sunday afternoon nap and curling is on, it is wonderful background noise.
Well, it's funny. I mean, my friend was into it. It was his birthday, so I was just going there for him. I didn't care, I did have fun. Like I did kind of get into it, and we sat next to some diehard fans, which was sort of fun. But yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, my nephew does curling. He's he's 9 now, I think, and he's a little curler, and I think it's great. I think it's wonderful.
Well, my friend, not so long ago, he actually went to some classes, and he was like, "You got to try it." And I was like, "No way, man! That move is gonna fuck up my hip. You kidding? My SI joint can't handle that big, crazy lunge that they do." You want
to talk hip. Oh boy, the word's just hip flexibility.
Yeah.
Curlers, man, they've got it.
Yeah, it doesn't look easy on the body, is all I'm trying to say.
Yeah. No.
Anyways, we digress, but you're in Canada, and I guess that's interesting because I don't really know. I mean, I guess I've talked to a lot of Canadians over the years, but it seems like Canada had a similar trajectory of yoga like New York did in a way where, like we said, it started out with like sweet ladies in, basements and church rooms or whatever. Yeah. And then at some point the centers start opening up and stuff, and it starts to hit the mainstream more. Was that your experience where you were?
Absolutely. The studio system really kind of took over here. In terms of big retreat centers, that's not so much a thing, but certainly the studio system took over hardcore here. 10 years ago.
Interesting. When you say the studio system, what are you referring to? I mean, I think I know what you're referring to, but I'm curious. What do you mean when you say that?
I mean okay. I'm going to try not to trounce on feelings too hard.
No, you can trounce. Don't trounce. Don't trounce. But be candid. Look, I'll say this because I just had someone on the show this week, and we were talking about the studio model or the business model of studios.
Yes.
And basically, there were problems. I owned a studio for 10 years, so I know firsthand. So I'm just saying, don't hold back.
Okay, cool. Yeah, the generally speaking, lovely, young, highly flexible studio owner, usually female, but not always, who's charging upwards of $20 a class, And even the beginner classes we're teaching crow, we're teaching this, we're teaching
the beginner classes are designed to like get you ready for the other classes or whatever.
Right. Like they're basically, and the teachers, even the teachers who have been teaching a long time, are teaching to one body, are teaching to one sort of, and it's entirely asana based. You might get a teacher who teaches with some philosophy. You might get a teacher who teaches with some breathing practice involved, but most of the time it's asana, it's young, it's flexible, it's inaccessible.
Good playlist.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. And I think for me, even though I did practice at a studio, and I have to say I really enjoyed the studio I practiced at for quite a while. By the time I made it to a studio to practice, I was so confident in myself that the fact that I was the biggest person in the room, that the fact that most of the teachers did not know how to teach to me or how to teach in a way that included me, I was okay. But
I see. You were giving lessons. You were like, let me give you a few lessons here.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, but good for you, yeah.
Yeah, but I know I was in the minority in that way, because a lot of times somebody who is in a big body, who shows up in a public class, in a studio, they don't have the experience of being in their body. They didn't grow up dancing and have the proprioception and the knowledge of how their body could move. In terms of variations and modifications, whatever language you want to use around poses, adaptations of poses, I had an instinctive knowledge of my body and how I could adapt. I never really needed a teacher to show me how to adapt, but I was lucky. That's a level of privilege in my understanding of my knowledge of my body. And a lot of people who walk into any kind of a movement space in a big body don't have that. And if you've got a teacher who doesn't know what to do with somebody who's in a big body, and they don't have that innate knowledge as to how to work in their body, that person is going to walk out of there with a potentially really bad experience.
Yeah, and even if you know what you need to do for you, sometimes if it means going against the grain of the class or what the teacher is saying, that's a hard thing to do, to like
so much.
Have like the courage or the gumption to like counter the teacher or to say no or whatever,
Yeah, it takes a long time as a yoga practitioner to feel confident in a class when the teacher says, okay, do this, and you kind of go, no. Yeah. That takes experience. That takes experience and a feeling of like, okay, I'm going to be fine in this class, even if I'm not listening to that teacher. And I had a teacher who, she was one of the teachers I went to her classes regularly at the studio, because from one of her very earliest classes, she would actually say, listen, if I say something and it does not feel right to you, don't do it.
Yeah.
And I was like, thank you. Just
that's a simple thing to say, actually. It's not that hard to say such a thing.
It's a really simple thing to say.
It's another thing to actually, as a teacher, create that space where that's totally cool and people can feel that.
Yes, true. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the things that, coming back to that question of online, has done is, with the cameras off, I have no idea if a person is doing what I'm cueing or not. And the truth of the matter, as long as they're not hurting themselves, okay. I'm a little worried that, they're trying something crazy and injuring themselves, but I can't do anything about that. But if, I say, extend your right leg back long or whatever I'm saying, and they're like, yeah, no, I'm not lifting my leg. Okay. That's cool.
How are you going to know anyways? Yeah.
Right.
And even if they were, you only saw part of their leg. You know what I mean? Like the way that camera angle is, you can't always see stuff anyways, which is interesting because that has actually required teachers, I think, to make changes to how they teach them, sometimes in positive ways.
Yeah.
But to another point that you made earlier that I think's interesting, you know, that idea that it's okay for you to choose not to do stuff or to do stuff differently in class. I mean, there are some approaches to practice where teachers would sort of feel that as like almost disrespectful or something. I remember when I was doing teacher training back a long time when I had my center in Brooklyn, I would have this part of the training be that people should go try other approaches to practice, different from what they were studying with me, especially people who didn't already have that experience. I was always saying, you got to go experience these things for yourself. So they were supposed to go try like 5 different kinds of classes from what they were learning with me.
Nice.
And we were supposed to like have some conversation about what their experience of it was.
Yeah.
And so one of the students who had never been to any other kind of yoga classes, and I teach what now they would call like a slow flow, you know, it was like a very mindful, simple kind of vinyasa practice.
Nice.
And she went to like a more typical power style.
Mm-hmm.
And they were doing like, I think like a high lunge or something. And she was doing it the way I taught her, which was pretty much have her feet pretty and close together so she could just feel really steady and stable. It wasn't like trying to make it a wider lunge. And the rest of the class, I think, was going for their thigh to be like perpendicular or like parallel to the floor.
Right.
And the teacher came over to her and said, "Are you not trying hard on purpose?" And she said, "Yes." And to his credit, he left her alone. And he's like, okay. And he walked away. But like in that class, that was like a foreign idea.
Yeah.
And it always struck me. It's like, oh, you see, sometimes it's not even about the pose. It's not about the form even. It's about the idea of like, if you should be going more or if you should be finding the right amount for you today. Like those are 2 very different things or something.
Oh, absolutely. And like the teacher training that I did, I'm very grateful because we were also encouraged to try some different options and to see what, you know, was out there. And I had actually done a little bit of that myself already. In that, you know, we had a big yoga fest event and I actually went and did a Ashtanga half series or whatever. And whoa, did I find out that was not my jam. It's cool if it is yours, but it's not mine.
Those jump backs wear you down over time. I did them for a long time, and then over time, I don't do them anymore. I mean, I know some people love them, but not me anymore.
Well, and it's one of those things that I think is one of the beauties of the practice of yoga is that when we realize that there are so many options out there and there are so many variations and there's so many potential places for us to learn, even if it's what we're learning is that's not for me, right? Because that's such a huge lesson is that moment of, oh, this is not mine. And that's okay.
Yeah, it's not that you're inadequate. It's just, no, that wasn't for you.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. And that's where we've got to get a little bit of the fitness and the diet culture out of it, because that idea of inadequacy really comes in from that sort of mindset.
See, that is to my earlier point about it. See, what happened, it's interesting, like at an earlier time in yoga, they were more accessible spaces because they weren't about fitness. But when the fitness thing kind of took over, which it most definitely did, and still to this day, in a lot of ways, when I look at, seems like yoga teachers, this is for yoga teachers, it's all about how to do core strengtheners. And I'm like, really? Is that what advanced yoga is about? Core strengtheners? I don't know. And that fitness element, that actually is what makes the spaces not accessible anymore, because it takes on that culture, like you're pointing to.
It makes the spaces unsafe, like for a lot of people. It's unfortunate because, let's be honest, the asana practice is wonderful for our bodies. It is absolutely wonderful for our bodies. And there's nothing wrong with strengthening and building our flexibility and all of those things using the asana, but it's still not a fitness practice.
Right.
And it's been taken over as such, and it's like, oh, come on, people.
Yeah, I have often really, in general, had issue with the sort of yoga for this, and a lot of times I get it because there's actually is a benefit to like having a group of people that have a similar situation or same population or something. I get that, but like yoga for weight loss, I don't know about that. I mean, I think that I've known a lot of people who, through yoga practice have found their healthy weight, but I don't, when people are like, let's do jump backs to sweat more, to burn off calories or whatever. Yeah. I'm like, no, didn't we already learn that that's not how it works? Or isn't there better ways for people to find their health in that?
Yeah, I'm with you there. That to me is a massive red flag. And it, especially for folks in big bodies who are deciding to be brave and try some kind of new movement, that's a kind of cue that could literally send them running and they'll never come back. And it's not that the teacher is trying to cue something that might be a challenge, because in fact, I love being challenged. I want to get pushed sometimes in a class, right? And so there's nothing wrong with that. It's the minute that it turns into a bit of a morality around weight. That is, and anytime it's like, let's do this to burn more calories. Oh, no.
I mean, I feel the same thing about like burning off toxins in your body or like sweating out the toxins. Like, I feel the same way about that.
Oh, gosh. that one turns
because it's like,
ragey,
we're toxic and we need to get it out of us. I'm like, no, we're not toxic. We're mystical wonders. Come on.
Yes, I'm with you there. That one just, I literally was in a class at one point, and the teacher, I guess, was teaching a class with all on twists. And hey, a twist class can be lovely, but unfortunately, the entire, it would be cue and then discuss why this twist is getting rid of these toxins. And by the end of the class, I was almost crying with stress. Because I'm like, I just can't even, and I'm trying to be polite and not walk out of your class. I'm just trying to survive it at this point and get my practice in. Yeah. It wasn't good.
I guess that's my point, though. It seems like sometimes there's a view, and this is what I've been talking about in the training, because like I want to establish these ideas with folks, because there's a viewpoint that's held by the teacher, even when it's not voiced. And that sets a tone when people walk in the room.
Yes.
That's a lot of like accessibility and inclusivity seems to me come down that it's like a personal work that teachers do in themselves, so that they bring that with them in the room.
Yes. When you walk into the room, and this is my experience as a teacher or as a student, and you look different, there is a look you get. And if the look you get is, hey, hi, welcome, I'm happy you're here, you know it.
You feel it. You can tell there's no faking that shit either, I bet.
There's no faking it, okay? And if the look you get is, oh, you know that too.
Or it's even like a fear, oh, fuck. Right?
And one of my personal, I'm trying to figure out, I'm trying to decide whether I'm doing the work on this or not. I had been teaching in a gym before the pandemic, and I loved teaching in a gym, because the great thing about the gym I was teaching in is the studio space actually had a glass wall. And so what that meant was that all of these people in the gym who were walking past and saw me teaching, saw a big person teaching a class. So I really loved that. That made me feel very like, okay, just by seeing me, your brain is getting shifted, which is awesome. But beyond that, I really enjoyed the fact that when one of the more gym bro types decided to come into my class and gave me that look of, oh, you're the teacher. I guaranteed by the end of the class, they were dying on their mat.
I'm sure you made a point. Those muscle bro guys, I've had them in my class too. Yeah.
I think my general style of teaching is I try to teach like probably comparable in that, you said you go with a slower flow. I do the same thing, but I do try to add like some strength building elements into it, because being a person of a certain age, I'm looking forward to the next 20, 30 years, and I want to maintain my strength as much as I can. So my teaching some strength-based stuff is entirely for my own. Right?
No, I hear you. I've been having like some issues with my feet, like I like this bunion kind of situation, like it's just starting, but I was like incorporating foot massages and stuff into the classes because I need it. I get it. Right? It's like that's what you need, so you find a way to put them in and share it with other people too.
Well, because probably somebody else in your class could use it as well. Exactly. So I very much am like, and I, at the time I was in the gym, the class I was teaching, it was called Fun Flow. And I tried to add a lot of weird and different transitions. And I mean, let's be honest, sometimes they worked, sometimes they didn't, but it was to keep people from getting too much into their usual brain of their practice, right?
Right, mix it up so they have to be present to pay attention, I guess.
That kind of thing, right? And so it would also be really fun when I would get somebody in who clearly had an existing yoga practice, but they hadn't come to my class before. Because they would start doing something with my first cue, and the next thing you know, they're stopping and looking at me going, "How, what?"
I see.
And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to make you work.
You threw them some curveballs. You got to do that if they're too grooved in. I get it.
Yeah, I'm gonna make you work through your practice and be present and connect inwards, because that just kind of going away in your practice is lovely, and once in a while it's great to just sort of sink into that usual and let your brain go, but you're not actually present then.
See, now that actually does kind of bring us to where you were saying before about like online, because you can't do what you just described.
Nope.
On Zoom.
You cannot.
You can't use your choices as a teacher in that same way.
That's right. So instead, I make my choices as a teacher based on people giving themselves grace. Mm-hmm. Right, which is a completely separate choice, but they're in my brain equal, and it's going to, in fact, when we get back into whatever normal is, we ever get back there, it's going to make my choices as a teacher different sometimes, because now I spend a lot more time focusing on honoring your body. Yeah, I'm here as a guide. I'm here to help you, find a practice, but honor your body instead of, and so it's a very different choice, and it's been a really interesting growth for me as a teacher.
I don't think you're the only one. And I think also, I have a theory I want to bounce off you, because when you just were talking, like when you're in person with someone, you're getting all kinds of information and cues off of people.
Yeah.
And I think the best teachers make their choices off of that information like you're describing. I think Absolutely. That's when classes are like most like co-creative and interesting and like powerful. So I think that's very cool. I get that. But when we're doing online classes now, we don't have those same kind of cues. Like I think sometimes I get little bits of information off of what I see in those little squares. Mm-hmm. And as I've come to know people more over time, because I've had people doing my online classes for years now, I think I get more little hints or clues. But in the absence of being in the same room with them and really getting those nonverbal communications, it's intuitive.
Yes. Yep.
You're having to go inside and feel, okay, what does it feel like we should be doing together today? Because you can't get the cues from them. You kind of just got to feel into the moment of being in the Zoom with everybody.
Well, and the interesting is I'm not currently really teaching on Zoom.
Okay.
I'm teaching on a different platform where I don't have any video at all.
Oh, it's only one way?
It's completely one way.
Oh, but Cara, that's kind of hard. I stopped doing that because if everybody wants to turn off their cameras, they can, but it's hard not to be performative when it's just you in front of the camera.
It is. I agree. And so one of the reasons that right now this is how I'm doing it is entirely for the financial accessibility. Because when we get into issues of accessibility, there's still the question of financial, right? And
if you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of J. Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.